الثقل والغرابة على الدين كله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to talk briefly about the history of Palestine. But the history of Palestine is really huge and massive. You cannot just summarize it in one lecture or two lectures, but we will do our best, inshallah, to make it simple and to make it clear in that short time, inshallah ta'ala. Before I start, there is a book that I recommend for everybody, or an author actually. His name is Arif Al-Arif. He's a Palestinian historian. This man, mashallah, his writings are so deep, so informative about Palestine. He wrote so many volumes. One of them is the history of the city of Gaza, this city that is being bombed by the Israelis right now. And tonight, inshallah, we're going to talk about the history of that city, because talking about taking one city and talking about its history will give us a general idea about the whole history of Palestine, since this is one of the oldest cities there. The city of Gaza is, as the other cities of Palestine, has been there before the time of Isa alayhi salam. You can talk about 4,000 or 5,000 years before that. So that means that's one of the oldest civilizations in the area, like the Egyptian civilization and the civilization of the people of Iraq and Syria and other places. So, and subhanallah, the same name of Gaza, it was the same name that they have at that time. They call it Ghazati, Gazati, Gazatu, it is the same exact name that's given to it from that old time, and also Gaza as the same name. The first people who lived in Palestine at that time are Al-Kan'aniyun, the Canaanites, and they are Arabs, pure Arab tribes. So that takes away the claim of the Jewish people when they say we are the first people there. They know that they are not the first people, and the biggest proof is from the Bible itself, that they say that they tried to enter Palestine at the time of Musa and they were blocked, and then they entered after the time of Musa alayhi salam with Yusha ibn Nun. But even though when they entered Palestine, they were fought by the people of Canaan, Qaba'il Arabiya, and the other tribes who were very advanced in on war and fighting at that time. So they stopped them, and they just were cornered in one small portion at that time, since their numbers were not big anyway. The city of Gaza has very unique location in Palestine, because it is at the corner of Palestine, and it is the gate of Palestine to Egypt, and it connects also Palestine to the land of Al-Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, So that's why there was a lot of business going on even before the time of Islam. We're talking about the history. In the old time, people used to travel from Arabia through Gaza to Palestine and to the other areas of Sham. We're talking about Syria and Lebanon, on all these areas. So it was like a center between Africa and Asia at that time. So the business was going through Gaza at that time. That's why the people of Gaza, at that time, they were living on the business and the trade that was going on. And one of the interesting information is that the great-grandfather of Rasulullah ﷺ died in Gaza, and he was buried there. Hashim, his name is Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim. So Hashim is the one who died in Gaza in his 30s. He was around 30 years old. He was young. And he died there, and they buried him there. And even till now, they have a huge masjid called Masjid Hashim. They named him after the great-grandfather of the Prophet. Next to the grave, they built that big masjid. And they also have a big masjid called Masjid Umar ibn al-Khattab, Masjid al-Umari. They named it after the name of Umar ibn Khattab, even though Umar ibn Khattab did not come to Gaza, but they built it later on as kind of honoring him. Because at the time of Umar ibn Khattab, the armies started to march to the area of Sham and Egypt. So they want to honor him by building that big masjid and giving it the name of the Khalifa, Umar ibn Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him. So the first people who built Gaza, as I told you, were Al-Kan'aniyun, the people of Canaan, and other Arab tribes like Al-Anaqiyun, and Saba'iyun, and others. So many other tribes who lived there, and those are the ones, who built Gaza in the early history, as far as we can know, as I told you. طبعا Gaza in that old time, we're talking about 4,000 years ago, at the time of the pharaohs, was like all the other parts of the world that they worship many gods, like the Egyptians and like, the Romans, they have so many gods and they have temples at that time, and that was, normal. The Egyptians has very strong connection with Gaza since it is the first city from Palestine next to them. So sometimes the pharaohs will, take Gaza and take other parts of Palestine under their control, and sometimes the people of Gaza will drive them out of, and the people of Palestine will drive them out. So in and out wars between them and between, the people of Palestine. That made a strong connection also between the people of Gaza, specifically Gaza, and the Egyptians. That sometimes you're gonna find that till now, subhanAllah, as we're gonna go through the history, a lot of the people of Gaza have connections, strong connections with Egyptians, and they are married. Some of the people of Gaza are married from Egypt, some of the people of Egypt are married from Gaza. Like any other people who live in borders, like even from the Egyptian side with the borders of Sudanese, they get married and you're gonna find half of the tribe in that side of the country and the other half in the other side. So that's normal. So that's why there is a lot of connection between the people of Gaza and the Egyptians, since they are, next to each other and very connected. Gaza was invaded like all the other areas by the people of Babel, the people of Persia, the Romans, and all those civilizations came by. Alexander also passed by them in his way to Egypt, So they, like any other area in the world, they have been encountered by seeing other people coming, invading their land, and then they would leave after that, Even in the time of Isa alayhi salam, when the Christianity, was in the very beginning at the time of Isa alayhi salam, you're gonna find that the Romans were in control, as the Jewish people tried to put Isa in trouble with the Romans, to get rid of him. And the famous story that is in the Injil, the Gospel, if you go through it, how they put him in trouble to get rid of him because he was coming to change and to correct the corruption in the Jewish religion and coming with Christianity, but they did not accept it and they want to put him in trouble. So Gaza also, like the other people, the rest of Palestine, started accepting the Christianity at the time of Romans, when the Romans themselves started to change into Christianity at the end. So the people of Gaza also started to accept it, and they say that the family of Isa alayhi salam, they passed by Gaza in their way when they were going in their journey to Egypt, when Isa was a baby or a little boy escaping from the Jewish people and stuff like that. So they passed by Gaza, and that's why Gaza has a special place for that place that they believe that Isa passed by it. In the beginning, the Christianity did not go fast in Gaza and Palestine in general. Why? Because the people of Palestine, this is a new religion to them. They are not, used to it, so they started to fight back, especially the people who are pagan, believe in many gods, but later on, Christianity started to become, widespread, and the people started to accept, Christianity, more often, until the time of Islam came. When Islam came, and Banu Israel, as I told you before, they were after they moved out of Egypt and Musa get them out, they didn't manage to get into Palestine right away. And by the way, the name Palestine was given to them by some tribes who traveled also, the tribes of the Palestinians. These are tribes who traveled to Gaza and got married with the other tribes and mixed it with them. They fought in the beginning to take portion of Palestine. They took one portion of it, and then later on they mixed it with all the Arab tribes, and they didn't know exactly where they come from. This is where the name of Palestine came, from Palestine. This is a tribe that came, so they called them the Palestinians or the Palestinian. It's what is named after that specific, and they came at the time of the pharaohs, very old time also in the history. But those are the ones that the land was named after them at the end, the Palestinian, and they mixed it with the Arabs, got married with them, the same language, so they lived as, part of, some people say they came from Asia, parts from, South Asia, and some people say we don't know exactly the place, but anyway, they rested in the place and mixed it with all other tribes, and they have, connections. And this is where the place gets in the name. In the time of Islam, and this is the most important time for us, that when Islam came into Palestine, That was in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him. At the end of the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq, already in his time, after he suppressed those apostates who left Islam and started to fight against Abu Bakr, after he controlled them, then he started to send some groups or some armies, some to the borders of Persia at that time, and some to the borders of the Romans, and the areas they controlled from the Arab lands, if we can say, the area of Sham in total, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and also as well as Egypt on the borders. But Abu Bakr Siddiq, the biggest achievement, they made some progress, big progress in his time, but he did not manage to make the final, achievement, which is like coming to control big lands from these lands. He started to control some lands, but in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, subhanallah, they were waiting for the big battle when the time that Abu Bakr Siddiq passed away, when he died. Then Umar ibn al-Khattab became in power, and he found out that the armies are not achieving the expected achievement, and they're taking so long time, and they had to take some time, because we talked about that before, but inshallah we might talk in details about that. Then he gave a command that I want to change the general commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid, and I bought Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. He wrote it down, he sent it to them. It's going to take time until it reached them, subhanAllah, it reached them when they are preparing for the final battle. Okay, so when Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah read it, he kept it secret, but he just told Umar ibn al-Khattab about it. Khalid ibn Walid about it. So Khalid told him, I ask you only to give you some few days to achieve my winning. Because if we change the leadership right now, that will confuse the Muslims, those who think that they're going to win under my leadership and then they have a new commander. Number two, they will get sad if they know the news that Abu Bakr died and they have another Khalifa, Umar ibn Khattab. Not because they hate Umar or they only love Abu Bakr, but they think that there is a big change, two changes coming at the same time. So we don't want to announce any of these now. They agree on that until Khalid ibn Walid won the battle, the most famous battle, or the Battle of Yarmouk, and then he suppressed all the armies and went over them, and he controlled the Sham. And then he gave the leadership. He took his turban as a leader, gave it to Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, and made him a leader. He listened and obeyed, and he became like one of his helpers. And subhanallah, that was the beginning of the winning, because as I told you, at that time Abu Bakr as-Siddiq sent groups. He sends Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan to Damascus, Sharahbil ibn Hasana to Jordan, Al-Urdun, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah to Hims in Syria as well, Amr ibn al-As to Palestine and Egypt. You see, so that was the plan. And then Amr ibn al-As continued. He went to Egypt first, and then when he was coming to Palestine, he had around 7,000 fighters with him. He controlled the first city he controlled, because I told you, right next to Egypt is Gaza. He entered Gaza first, and then he proceeded from Gaza to the rest of Palestine at that time. So subhanallah, that was a big win at that time. One of the interesting things as well, before I forget, that Imam al-Shafi'i, was born in Gaza, the city of Gaza in Palestine. He was born there, but his mom took him when he was like 2 years old and went back to Mecca and the land of Al-Hijaz again. Why? Because he's from the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He goes back to his great grandfather is Abdul Muttalib, so he goes back to the same grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so she said, since his father died and he became an orphan, I don't want him to stay in Gaza by himself. I want him to be connected with his big family there. So she went to him and she took him and went back to Mecca at that time. Also, after that, we have the time kept proceeding until we had the Crusaders. They came to the land of Palestine to control Palestine and Sham again. They want to get back after the Muslims kicked them out. They want to come back and control these cities, and that happened at the time of 100 AC after Isa alayhi salam. So they couldn't control Palestine and Gaza in the first campaign, but they did control it in the second campaign, and they took over it until Salahuddin came and he kicked them out of Gaza and Palestine totally in the famous battle of Hattin, Ma'rakat Hattin, that was 1187, when Salah ad-Din controlled it, and he returned, Gaza back to the Muslims, and they make them in charge back again. And subhanallah, shortly after his death, his sons, had wars, with among each other, and they started to make connections, sometimes with some other Muslim, powers like Al-Khwarizmiyya, and sometimes with even the non-Muslims against each other to control, this area or that area, and that made a lot of confusion at that time. So sometimes they lose Al-Quds, and sometimes they get it back. So it was not easy at that time. Until there was a big battle there that they even call it Hattin Thaniya, the second battle of Hattin. They make it similar to the first one that happened at the time of Salah ad-Din, when the Muslims, under the leadership of Salih Ayyub, they managed to fight the Christians out of Palestine again, and that was in the year 1200. That was before that time. So that was 1545 when they managed to control it, and they killed in the battle around 30,000, from the Crusaders who were still trying to get back to, and they took around 800, prisoners of war, and they took them to Egypt at that time. Until, subhanallah, another problem came and happened, which is, when Hulaku and the Mongols started to control the Muslim world, they managed to take out the Khilafah in Baghdad. And that was like one of the biggest things ever happened. Because the Muslims never thought that there will come a day and the Muslims stay without a Khalifa, without a ruler who will govern the Muslim world. They never thought. That's why when that happened, they thought that that's it. That's a day of judgment. It's happening soon after that. They couldn't imagine that this is really happening to them. And when the Mongols came, took over Baghdad, and killed almost 1 million or even more than 1 million Muslims, that was a big number at that time. Because the whole people of Baghdad at that time, you're talking about 2.5 millions, and this is the biggest Islamic city in the time. So when they kill half of them, and that you cannot walk in the street because of the bodies, and the bodies start to be rotten, and the diseases are everywhere, and they forced the people who are still alive to bury the other bodies and to take care of it so that they can enter the city after that. You can imagine how horrible was it at that time. And after they finished from Baghdad, they came forward to Palestine and Gaza, and they controlled it. And they sent a message to the Egyptians at that time that you have to surrender, or else we're going to do the same to you. But at that time, Qutuz, he was a Mamluk, like he was a slave in the beginning, working for Salah ad-Din and the descendants of Salah ad-Din, right? The Mamalik, Salah ad-Din brought them as Turkish people to work for him in the army, and they were well trained. They were they have high military techniques that till now they have some institutes in Europe and America. They teach the techniques of the Mamalik, how they fought in the war, because they know nothing but fighting, and they kept developing something, themselves. Even the great majority of them did not get married. They just warriors, fighters. You can imagine that. So when the message came to him, all he did is he read the message and told him to cut off the neck of this Mongol guy who bring the message. That's a declaration of war. That's the answer he gave to them. He didn't give them anything else, you see. So that made them crazy, who you are to think that you're doing that. But before they moved to him, he moved to them. So he went to Gaza and fought against them, and he drove them out of Gaza. So when they started to go to Sham, he went there also, and he managed to defeat them, the biggest defeat, and this is the first defeat they ever had in the world, in the Battle of Ain Jalut. That was the most famous, biggest defeat for the Mongols. SubhanAllah, they started to retreat after that from many areas of the Muslim world. And after some years, one of the grandsons of Hulaku, started to convert to Islam, and many numbers of the army converted. So the Mongols, who invaded most of the world at that time, were defeated by the Muslims, and the first defeat was in Gaza, actually. And subhanAllah, they come to Islam after that. Islam contained them after they destroyed, big parts of the Muslim world at that time. Then after that, after the Mamalik or the Mamluks defeated the Mongols, they controlled Gaza and make it under, their control, so that they take it as a stop to stop the invaders or any outside threat to Egypt and to Sham from that time. That continued until we come to the Othmans, who fought the Mamalik and came to power, and also Gaza was under the control of the Othmans since they are Muslims, so that was fine for them, at that time, and it kept like that until we come to the modern time. But this, inshallah, we're going to talk about it next time, after the Ottomans started to lose power, and then the French and the English and the other powers started to come to Palestine and Egypt and all the Muslim world at that time. But that's another time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم.